Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Loftus, and I'm responsible for your benchmarking department at HARDI. Thank you for being with us for the 2016 annual report of the unitary market. Our presenters today are Dan Vita of DNR, who is also HARDI's unitary market analyst, and Erica Burns of DNR. The objective of this service is to provide participating distributor members insight into the demand for equipment by efficiency level in the markets where they operate. Participating distributors gain a competitive advantage in their markets by being able to make more informed decisions, and we can use this deep local market history to help your utilities craft effective rebate programs. This insight is a HARDI member benefit that is available to participating distributors at no charge. Please contact me, Dan, or Erica if you would like to see this insight into your markets and your performance. 2017 is our 5th year working with DNR on this service. They are amazing partners, and we are very fortunate to have them on our team. I present to you Dan Vita and Erica Burns.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so just some quick administrative notes before we dig into the content. We are going to do a Q&A at the end of this webinar, but if you have any questions, feel free to just type them in the question or chat box just as they come up, and I'll compile them as we go, and then we'll answer them at the end. Okay, so data in this presentation comes from the Unitary Report, which receives its data from all of the HARDI distributors who are participating, and they send us their data on a monthly or quarterly basis, and then we report back to the distributors on a quarterly basis through our new web portal that we'll do a demo of at the end of this presentation. So we've been working with HARDI, like Brian said, for about 5 years now, and we collect the monthly HVAC sales data from almost 4,000 branches across the U.S. at this point. We're always welcoming new participants into the program, and for those of you who aren't currently participating, we would love to talk to you about participating and get you on board. It's really easy to join. You basically just pull your data on a monthly basis and send it to us, so we can talk to the details of that outside of this webinar. The data that we report on is split up by these HARDI regions that you can see on the map here, and we report by equipment type, so air conditioners, heat pumps, furnaces, and boilers, and we split out the air conditioners and heat pumps by ducted and ductless or mini split units. We also report on the efficiencies, so for ACs and heat pumps we report on nominal SEER, and for furnaces we report on AFUE. We split out refrigerant types and also fuel types as well. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Dan Vita. He is the Senior Manager of Market Intelligence and Product Development here at DNR International, and like Brian said, he is also HARDI's Unitary Market Analyst.
Thanks, Erica. So we're going to use this presentation to go over 2 parts. One, the market review, which will be mostly in this PowerPoint presentation. And then the second half of this is going to be a demo of the new web portal, which we rolled out towards the end of last year. It's provided a lot more functionality and ease of use to the participating members and allowed people to really dig into more of the data. So I'm going to show you what that is, how to use it, and also some insights that can be gained from it that we couldn't do before in our old quarterly reporting format. So first, let's look at an outline of the presentation itself. We're going to talk a little bit about the federal standard first, what it was, just a refresh for everyone, and how it impacted the market. We're going to look at the changes in the market and regional findings for the 4 major categories we report on: ACs, air source heat pump, ductless equipment, which is ductless mini splits, and furnaces. We're going to look a little bit at refrigerants, but specifically in this case, we're going to look at condensing unit designs for refrigerants in the residential sector, so in particular R410A, R407C, and R22 dry ship, and what's happened to those over the past 2 years. We're going to look at also packaged units, both residential and commercial, which is another new feature we've been able to report out on since we've transitioned over to the new portal. And then finally, last but not least, of course, we'll walk through a demonstration of the portal itself, give everybody an example of what the side-by-side comparison looks like, and also some trends in the market as well. So just to start off everything, some key findings in 2016. We saw continued growth in 2016. This was almost across all product categories and regions, though not all were created equal. So we're going to go over the differences in product types and growth rates by region and nationally. But overall, motor bearing units were up across the U.S. in 2016. Another interesting fact, and if any of you attended any of the presentations I delivered at the annual conference, I said there wasn't much of an impact from the standard on the regions with which they didn't impact. We're starting to see that change a little bit in some of the northern regions, and we're going to talk about what happened, particularly in the second half of last year. Finally, but not least, R22 has all been eliminated. There was a rule as of February 2016, but in fact, a lot of that changeover occurred far in advance of that rule. So really, dry ship units are non-existent these days. First, a quick refresher on the federal standard itself. I feel like I've said this a lot over the past 2 years, but you really can't talk about the residential market for ACs and air source heat pumps without talking about this federal standard. It is the first regional standard which DOE had put out, and there was a lot of questions on what the implementation of this would actually look like. For another quick refresher, this was a manufacturing date standard, so anything manufactured prior to January 1, 2015 could be SEER 13 across the country. Anything manufactured after that had to be 14, with the exception of ACs in the north. There was an 18-month grace period or sell-through period with the standard, particularly on ACs, which were still be allowed to be sold at the SEER 13 level in the north. Air source heat pumps didn't have any such sell-through because it was a 14 national, though anything manufactured before that January 1 date could continue to be sold until they were gone. So let's jump into it. Let's see how this actually had an impact. And we're going to start with ACs, the cooling side. That's the part of this that was actually regional in nature. So this is the quarterly breakdown of efficiency, 13, 14, 15, and 16 plus, going from top to bottom of AC equipment. That includes both split and package systems. And you can see the gradual shift from that 13 products to 14 products as the federal standard went into effect. As of January 1, 2015, we had almost 70% of the market still at that SEER 13 level. And now, as of Q4 2016, that level is down to about 30% nationally. So as you can see here, and we saw a little bit of a spike in Q2 2016, which is the typical place with which we see lower efficiency equipment sold, those peak summer cooling months. That traditionally was where the SEER 13 R22 unit was sold. It's still where more of the lower efficiency equipment is sold, particularly because of the spike in the north. But we did see a little bit of that transition away from only 14s being sold in the south, and we saw about a 3 to 4% change in the last 2 quarters. A little too early to call that a trend. It's something we're going to keep our eye on as we go into next year. Again, Q3 and Q4 certainly aren't the peak cooling months nor the peak sales months for air conditioning equipment anywhere in the country, but particularly in the north. So we're going to keep an eye on if that is actually a trend. But it was interesting enough for us to notice in the past 2 quarters. As far as growth goes, we saw fairly robust growth across the country. Nationally, we saw a growth of AC equipment at 5.5%, and that would be year-over-year volume from same-store sales. One of the things we do as we bring on new participants in the program is we only look at that subset of participants which we have 24 months of sales data. So what you're looking at here is a truly comparative analysis. It's not some artificially inflated growth rate. So what we saw on that is actually 5.5%. Obviously, this wasn't universal across the country. Some regions were down a little bit, in particular the southeastern and western region. And we saw very robust growth in the central and Great Lake regions with double-digit growth in the traditional AC product categories. Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and Southwestern all had close to that national growth rate of 3.3, so a little under it, but generally speaking, still showed significant growth. For this analysis, you can see on the left-hand side, we actually have estimated unit sales. So that would be the total market size in both 2015 and 2016. And not too surprisingly, you can see the Southwest and Southeast represent almost 1 million units a year on the AC side, with the central being right around the same, actually, just because it is such a large populated region with the way the HARDI regions are broken up. Mid-Atlantic and Northeast are a little bit smaller, so that's why you see still a lot of growth, but certainly not the same volume of units in those two regions as we see in other parts of the country. This is a picture of a snapshot from actually 2016 of the estimated unit sales of ACs and air source heat pumps side by side to give you some idea of what the relative volume of that looked like in 2016. You can see, generally speaking, and we'll get into this when we get into the air source heat pump specific section of the presentation in a couple slides here. But generally speaking, air source heat pumps were more efficient, not only in that lower bin, that SEER 13 to 14 changeover, which was the impact of the national standard, but also in that 16 plus bin, what we consider that premium efficiency product. You can see air source heat pumps, almost over 28% of those sold last year were 16 plus units, whereas for ACs only 18%, 18.9% were that 16 plus premium piece of equipment. Generally speaking as well, you see in that air source heat pump section right now, we had about 6.5% 13. That would be the remainder of whatever was manufactured before January 2015. And that is pretty much almost completely sold through the market at this point. Relatively speaking, you can see here it's about a 2.5 to 1 ratio of ACs versus the number of air source heat pumps. That has been pretty consistent, though air source heat pumps over the past several years have had more robust growth than ACs, so that isn't the case this year. And let's talk a little bit about air source heat pumps. First, just to show you that full sell-through period of air source heat pumps and the effects on efficiency. You can see we did have a pretty steady decline of that 13 product as they were sold through the market, much steeper than on the AC side from a national perspective. And you also see a slightly gradual trend of improvement in SEER value going from Q1 2015 all the way through Q4 2016. Particularly, again, in that SEER 16 plus, you can see there was mostly a one-for-one trade-off, but most of the benefit in this case of the higher efficiency equipment was actually in that premium SEER equipment. You can see it was at about 21% of the market. Now it was through Q4 of 2016, about 28, 29% of that market. So we are seeing some gradual improvement in more premium efficiency equipment, particularly on this air source heat pump side. So I did mention that we are including both ACs and air source heat pumps in this analysis. And for ductless equipment, again, we're talking strictly ductless mini-split pieces of equipment. We're not talking about something like a PTAC or a PTHP, which is duct-free, but is sort of a one-room solution. We're talking about something that is mini-split technology here. So about 83.5% of all ductless mini-splits sold are the air source heat pump, while 16.5% are cooling only or AC. Those cooling only do tend to be those single head pieces of equipment, generally intended for cooling a central space, like server rooms, things like that. This ratio has been relatively consistent over the years, though we've seen it go as low as 80-20 and probably about as high as what you see here in front of you, with about 83, maybe as high as 85% of all the products sold being air source heat pumps. Again, this is the breakdown for 2016. When we look at growth, we actually see fairly robust growth in this product category, again, for another year. If you've been following or participating in this program since the beginning, you've seen very robust growth of ductless equipment, often in the double digits. We didn't quite hit double digits this year at the sell-through level for our participating distributors, but we got very close at 8.2%. Given that the vast majority of these are air source heat pumps, though, you can still see the subset of air source heat pumps had a very strong growth year. When we came in, our estimated units for this year at about 660,000 units moving through the midstream. Almost every region showed growth, with the sole exception here being the central region. And this is another one of those data points we've cross-checked every way we can think of. We've looked at everything from our one storefront shops all the way up to our national participants, and this was a fairly consistent trend. And even in those that sold in multiple regions, they showed growth in a decline in central, even if they showed growth in other regions. And it was only a minor decline. A very, 1.7% is almost even, so still very minor with the vast majority here showing robust growth. Particularly the Great Lakes region showing almost 27 to 28% growth in the ductless category. So furnaces, I don't want to forget about furnaces. I know we seem to talk about cooling-dominated equipment a lot, but the furnace market also paints an interesting picture last year. First and foremost, there was no finalized regulatory activity. So what you see here in front of you is a more consistent graphic, something that started the year at about 50%, that 80 AFUE product, and that's effectively what we ended the year at last year. I also want to point out here that we often talk about condensing units as 90 plus and everything else from 80 to under 90. But there are really four main bins with which furnaces sell in, and that would be the 80 to 82, most of those being 80 pieces of equipment, 92 to under 94, which most of those are actually 92 pieces of equipment, 94 to 96, under 96, which actually most of those are 95 pieces of equipment, and then that 96 to 97.99 bin is the other dominant bin. All the other ones, there's only fractions of sales, so I wanted to point that out. I'm going to re-bin this now and look at it as on a monthly basis, and then as opposed to a quarterly, which is what we have here. And so I'm re-binning this in 80 to 89, 90 to 95, 95 plus to show actually two specific trends here. When I mentioned earlier that cooling-dominated products, there's actually a spike in low-efficiency equipment sales in the most predominant month. Furnaces, we actually have the opposite effect. Peak furnace months are typically October and November, and we actually see that is when we get peaks in the most efficient equipment sold here. So sort of explains a little bit of that 95 plus being the predominant bin in a lot of parts of the country, in particular the northern regions. That 95 plus bin can be as much as 60 to 70% of the product sold. In some states, that can reach as high as 90% of the product sold. And you can see that trend here where the 95 bin, that top bin here, that aqua blue color, dips downward, which actually means it's increasing the market share in that October-November timeframe. Even given that, we do have fairly consistent trends in efficiency sold throughout the year, and not surprising given the state of the furnace market and no finalized regulatory activity. Growth rates look pretty robust again for furnaces as well, at about 5% on a national basis. Again, we had fairly consistent growth, though in this case, our northeastern and mid-Atlantic regions, we did see a bit of a decline. And we saw our most robust growth in the central region. Actually, which pairs nicely with the robust growth we saw of split system AC products, as those two are often paired together. So it makes a lot of sense to see that pretty big bump in furnaces for matched systems being replaced. Everybody else was relatively right around that national growth rate, somewhere between 4 to 7%, with the western region, being about even. As Erica mentioned earlier, we do track fuel type here as well. As you can see, this is what we have for the breakdown of fuel type of furnaces, natural gas versus a fuel oil furnace. It's also important to note here that the furnace numbers you're looking at don't include electric inserts or electric kits for an AC system, so your 5, 10, and 15 kW kits aren't included in this analysis or breakdown. Those would obviously have an AFUE of 100%. We just don't include them in this analysis because there's no variability there on efficiency. So we're going to jump into refrigerants. And I mentioned earlier that what we're actually going to talk about here is the design of condensing units and what refrigerants they're supposed to take when they're sold. We're going to concentrate strictly on ACs for this next slide because that's really where the movement was. A lot of the air source heat pumps were already at R410A, but most of the R22 stuff was confined to that 13 SEER R22, so that 13 SEER bin. DOE did actually issue some guidance last year, effectively ending the manufacture of R22 equipment as of February 1, 2016. Truth is, most of it was shipped through before that, mostly due to the fact that Tier 13 R22 was the predominant product. Once half the country had to go to Tier 14 anyway. A lot of those products ended up dropping out. So most of the dry ship units went away as of last summer anyway. R407C units have started to come into the market, but still represent a small minority. And to look at what that minority looks like, here's a monthly graphic of R410A, R22, and R407C. You can see the vast majority of the market for ACs is that R410A. Actually, with the last tail end of last year, over 96 to 97% of the market is that 410A. You see a little bit of that, if you can see the very little bit of light blue at the top, that is the 407C units we've started to see in the data. And the green, that R22 is almost completely gone now. It's something we're going to keep our eye on. We may see more 407C units, but as of this point, we've seen very little movement there. Another thing to note here is that this is ACs only, as I mentioned. So if you look at total condenser volume, 410A, it represents 98 to 99% of what's being sold right now on the residential side. Packaged units. This is another thing we just started reporting on with the implementation of the portal this year. With something we've always tracked internally, but we haven't actually been actively reporting on it. So this is the first time on an annual basis we can take a look at what the growth rate was and what that looks like in the market. So I'm actually going to break these into two categories. You know, they would be considered your typical residential style, so anything under 65,000 BTU or about 5 tons, and anything over that. And so we're going to look at the growth rate here first, and not too surprisingly, at least given what the standard levels were here, we've actually seen some decline on the residential side here. Some strong declines in actually what we consider the gas electric unit. That's the bars all the way on the right. That would be your dual fuel product, something that's an AC condenser with a natural gas heating side to it. So ACs in this case would be considered something that's AC only or AC with an electric insert. And air source heat pumps is just as it sounds, the packaged air source heat pump unit. One trend here to point out, and I pointed this out at the annual conference as well, is we've seen actually fairly robust growth and some transition over to air source heat pump products, particularly on the commercial side. But even though there's that robust growth, they are not the predominant product. And so here you can see a breakdown of the individual product types by those two bins, the residential versus commercial. The dual fuel product represents the majority in both cases, probably not too surprising to anybody who deals with this stuff, but it represents almost 70% of that sold in the commercial sector, where it's closer to 50% sold on the residential side. Air source heat pumps may be surprising to some. Actually, the second category on the residential side, packaged air source heat pumps, with AC only being the smallest category in both cases. So a quick conclusion before we jump over to the website. To wrap it up, significant sales decreases in Tier 13, almost entirely due to the standard in most parts. The Southern Tier 14 standard had little impact on the North. We've started to see some impact, but we're not willing to call that a trend yet. It's something we're going to keep our eye on. For most products and regions, the majority of the sell-through was completed by last summer. That was confirmed as we got Q3 and Q4 data here. And again, perhaps most importantly, we saw growth for most products and categories across most of the regions in the country. Okay, so we're going to pause here real quick. I'm going to bring up the website, and then we're going to give a demonstration of where some of this data comes from. All the data we pulled for this actually came directly from the portal. One of the things that we used to only report on quarterly roll-ups for the past 12 quarters, but or for the past 4 quarters, excuse me. But one of the things we now have the ability to do is offer monthly, quarterly, yearly analysis on demand to any participating distributor. So when you go to the website listed, you'll be brought to this homepage. I'm going to log in with our demo account because we actually have demonstration data for a fake distributor here, so you can see what the side-by-side comparison looks like when you log in as a participating distributor. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And you can see this is what you'll land on. Some basic navigation here. Left-hand side is all of your criteria selection. This would be product type, things like efficiency, cooling capacity, additional metrics such as refrigerant, ducting type, and package or split systems. And then you'll have regional breakdowns and date selection as well. So you can choose discrete time periods. You can look at all the data you've submitted or all the data we have for the market estimate. And you can look at two regions right now, HARDI region and DOE conservation region. Our goal is to, by the end of the year, with significant increases in participation, to offer state-level analysis as well as a more granular way to look at this, and something that represents, in all likelihood, better information for your local market. So we have that ability. We're testing it internally now, but we would like some more participation before we offer that analysis. But it is in our plans at this point. Some other things, if you are a current participant, you can get what is effectively the old quarterly download. We used to provide this in an Excel form. That is available to you in the top right-hand side. And all you have to do is simply click on this, and you'll get an Excel spreadsheet that downloads all the different regions and product categories with growth rates for the past 4 quarters and data for the past 8. But what's really exciting about this portal is the specific analyses you can do on subcategories, which was something we weren't able to offer before. Before I jump into some of the sub-analysis, I'll show you a very basic thing. It's something that came from where a lot of the basic graphics on a national perspective came from. So I'm going to select AC and include SEER. Here you have a SEER selector. I'm going to leave that at the min to max from 13 to 26. I'm going to go down and select discrete years of 2016 and 2015, but I'm going to hit search. And so here's actually the last 24 months of data. The first thing you see on the screen would actually be the growth rates for ACs. What you have here is the market growth in blue, and in the case of a participating distributor, this would be your sales growth, so based on your own sales volume. And what you're looking at here, again, is demonstration data for those in red in this top. But you can see, you can get a comparative analysis of what's happened in the market versus what's happened at your own organization. The next two graphics on here would be the distribution of efficiency. If you hover over any of these, you can see that you can actually get the actual percentage and sales volume. So in this case, this is distribution of your reported sales. So this would be the distributor sales. So you can see this would be 972 units of SEER13 sold in December of 2016. The same is true for the market estimates. You can see you get both the percentage of what was sold in the market and also the estimated unit count. So one way you could use this very quickly is to look at that 38.96 in December and compare it to what happened in the market, which would have been 43.34. So that side-by-side comparison is really the power of this. The final two here are reported sales volumes for your sales. So the axis you can see here would be 0 to 12,000 units as the distributor. The one on the bottom would be the market estimates for ACs in this case with the individual bins. And again, hovering over any of this gives you the actual values that are displayed in that graph. Some other cool things you can do with this is you can actually, once you run an analysis, you can roll this up to the quarter as opposed to the monthly growth, or you can roll it up to the year itself. So you can get a sense of what the market growth was versus the sales growth of your organization, see if you're underperforming or overperforming against the market. You can also export anything that you see, or download rather, just by hitting this export button. Once you hit that, you'll be prompted for an Excel file will download directly to your computer, to your downloads folder in all likelihood, and then you can open that up and it will display the graphics you saw on the screen, plus the raw data in 2 tabs. Your data in the first one, and then the market data in the second tab. You can use that data to, if you would prefer, to create slides for a PowerPoint presentation and really slice and dice this any way you want. It allows you the freedom for those of you on the phone that like to really dig into the numbers get those that effectively raw data and really play with it and do some cross-analysis. Another interesting thing the portal has allowed us to do is to do cross-tabulation. This was something that we could never do before in our current, in the old Excel format, but it allows us to look at things like both seer and capacity at the same time. So that's actually the analysis I'm going to look at now. I'm going to include seer and capacity, and I'm going to look at one discrete period in time, 2016. So we'll look at what happened in 2016 as a crosstab of both seer and capacity. I hit search, and there you can see the results on the screen. So you can get a sense of the different seer categories being sold by each of the nominal tonnage. What we report on here, you're seeing nominal half-ton increments from 6 to 72,000. So it would be 6,000, 12,000, 18,000 BTU per hour. And then you have your efficiency bins on the top. You can also, in this case, see the comparative analysis of your reported sales again here versus the market at large. And then another graphic showing, again, volumes this time as opposed to the efficiency breakdown. One key difference with the analyses I was showing before is you can't roll this up to, since it is a crosstab, you can't roll this up to month, quarter, or year. Whatever discrete time period you pick is what will be displayed on the screen. So in this case, I'm looking for all of 2016. I do have the ability to look at date ranges that are not listed there. So I can look at, let's say, the last half of last year in this crosstab. So I could type in 7/1/2016 all the way over to 12/31/2016. You can see when you do select that date, you have the choice of either typing it in or there's a date box that will appear that you can actually select the date you would like. And then all we have to do is hit search. So now what you're looking at is actually just the last half of last year in this crosstab formula. So you can slice and dice any discrete time period you would like to, both in this cross-tabulation analysis and in the broader analysis. One of the other interesting things that this new portal allows you to do is actually look at growth rates of specific product categories. This is one thing that was a little bit more difficult to do before, particularly in the light of the federal standard, when 2 seer bins would actually be considered the baseline efficiency. So is the bottom of the market getting more or less efficient? Does it hold less market share? That was difficult to report on in the old reporting format. That's become much, much easier with this portal. What I'm going to do, I just hit the refresh button. That actually wipes out all your selections and gets rid of what's on the screen so you can start fresh. And what I'm going to do is look at ACs, and to look at the bottom of the market, I'm going to look at the combined 13 and 14. So I'm going to go ahead and put 14 in here, and I'm going to look at it for the entire time period. So I'm not actually going to select a date here, which will return the full set of data that is available to participating distributors. I'm not going to include seer in this case because I'm actually just curious about the growth rate. I'm going to go ahead and hit search. And so what you see here is the individual monthly growth rates for that 13 and 14 product category combined, what would be considered the minimum efficiency of the market over time. So you can look at the two combined together and see what that looks like. So for instance here, you can see the market growth at 5.5%, at 8.2. Thank you. My apologies, I actually forgot to hit include in seer. It is important to note that if you don't include that, this is actually just looking at the total volume. So even though I changed that slider, you actually have to select the include in seer and click the slider for it to take everything into account. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again. So we saw before, which was the overall market from both the presentation and that one we just ran, that overall growth rate of ACs at large were 5.5%. When we look at this now, we can see the growth of those bottom two categories together was 2.7%. So I talked a little bit earlier about a general trend to higher efficiency products. This sort of confirms not only there's that general trend, but it's actually towards the more premium efficiency products, that 15 and 16 seer, because of the discrete difference between the national total and the 13-14 bin combined. So that's one of the types of analyses you can really get a sense of what those product trends are. Are there real changes in the market when you look at broader bins like that. And you can also do the same sort of thing in the north if we look at one of the HARDI regions specifically. So if we look simply at the Northeast region, you can see here there is an actual decline in that 13 to 14 bin. So there was a growth. If there was a growth in the national perspective or in the total perspective here, so if we move the slider all the way over to the right again, we can take a look at what that growth rate looks like. And you can see actually in the case of the Northeast, there was a decline in the 13 and 14 bin, but an overall growth of 3% from last year. So this really helps you drill down to those specific product trends and really get a better sense of what the efficiency of different types of products are, different sizes based on capacity, and also things like the impacts of the federal standard. I'm going to run one heating analysis before I open it up for questions, just so you can see the different selection options there as well. When you go over to heating, you can see you do have furnace and boiler. We include air source heat pumps on the cooling side, even though they are both a heating and cooling product. So if you want to analyze air source heat pumps, important to note you have to look at them on the cooling side for now. But again, here we have the same basic selection types with the inclusion of fuel type here. Capacity here goes in 20,000 BTU increments as opposed to half-ton increments or 6,000 BTU hour increments. But we have the same regional selections here and the same date selections here as well. So similar to some of the graphics you saw in the presentation, if we look at, I'm going to increase the increments here, so the increment of analysis, what the binning is, to every 5 AFUE, and I'm going to go from 80 to 100. I'm going to go ahead and search nationally on that. And so again, here you can see the comparative analysis of your sales versus the market at large, the growth rate of the market at 5% as we saw in the presentation. But you can also see the 5 increment bins here, similar to what we viewed in the presentation again. And you can do the same hoverovers and exports that you can do on the cooling side. To show you a little bit of a different of the regionality here, I'll actually look at the northern region to look at the DOE conservation regions. And I'd like to point out as well, if you select either one of those two, it actually blanks out the other. So if you select a conservation region, it will blank out the HARDI region. If you choose one of the HARDI regions, it will blank out the conservation region. So you can only choose one or the other. But we're going to go ahead and look at the north right now. And let's look at that for the past 2 years in a discrete period. I'll go ahead and hit search. So this is another thing I want to show you as well. So you may see this when you're searching through data for your own sales. But if you don't sell into a region, you'll get this warning box saying, I have no data to compare against. As a participating distributor, you actually get access to the market information for all the different regions. But if you don't sell any product in a particular region, you will get that warning telling you that it's only going to display the market information. Very quickly here, just to show you that market information, you can actually see here the differences in the northern region with almost 50% of the product being a 95+ product, which is very different from the national picture, which 50% of the product is actually 80 to under 90 products. So again, here you can see the differences even in the existing market without any regulation versus north for a southern climate. So with that, we only have about 15 minutes left scheduled, so I'd like to switch back over and open it up for any questions you might have. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan, for presenting, and thank you again to Brian and everyone else at HARDI for supporting us in this report and for helping get as many participants as we can and keep improving this to help the distributors.